Dear viewer, welcome to CRN Competences Corner. Today, I want to brief you about research process. Research process. Research process means the procedures, the stages that you go through when you are conducting your research. And here I want to submit to you 11 stages, 11 steps that you go through in the research process. The first step is to establish a general field of interest. Establish a general field of interest. The second step is doing or conducting extensive literature survey. Sometimes we call it literature review. And sometimes we call it also establish background and preparatory reading. In so doing here, you are establishing what we call a research gap based on the literature review. And I think you remember that I previously talked about a research gap. Step number 3 is selecting the topic of your research. Selecting the topic of your research. And step number 4 is selecting the title of your research. Remember that you select the topic in step 3 and select the title in step 4 based on the literature review you did in step number 2. Step number 5 is developing the working hypothesis or working objectives or working questions, research question. That is step number 5. The gap you obtained in step number 2 will now enable you to know the hypotheses that you want to address, the objectives or the question that you want to answer at the end of your research. Step number 6 is preparing the research design. And when you talk of research design here, you are talking of the methods, the methodology that you will be observing when you are conducting your research study. And step number 7 is collecting the data. Collecting the data to address the hypotheses or objectives or the questions that you have in your study or research. And step number 8 is collating, analyzing the collected data. Here you process the data and thereafter you analyze using different methods, whether qualitative or quantitative methods. And you remember that there are different qualitative methods or quantitative methods of analyzing data that will be addressed in the next lesson. And step number 9 is generalizing and interpreting the analyzed data. After analyzing your data, you need now to generalize and interpret the data based on the hypotheses, objectives, or research question that you have in your study. And step number 10 is preparing now the research report based on the generalizations and the interpretation of the analyzed data you made. And the 11th or the last step in the research process is submitting and publishing the research report. This report can be in terms of the conference proceeding, in terms of a journal article, peer-reviewed journal article. It can also be in terms of the thesis or dissertation being published, or sometimes it can be in the form of a book it depends the way you want to disseminate the results of your study. In short, those are the steps or the stages that we observe during the research process. I wish you all the best as you study each step successfully. And thank you very much for listening.